לישועה. עוזי זמרת יד ויהי לי לישועה. עוזי וזמרת יד ויהי לי לישועה. עוזי וזמרת יד ויהי לי לישועה. And as we get ready to cross over into Shabbat and into the festival, the last day of Passover, Erev Chag, we invite our friend Jen, still Schiff, and looks like Len is with her, and Adam. And so I'm going to invite them to start our festival service with the candle lighting. And we're using the festival book tonight. In addition, if you don't have the festival book, I'm going to screen share the Siddur at times, but we're on page 388.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Shabbat v'yom tov.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay, we're going to hear now from, yes, I'll take you off spotlight. So we're going to hear now from Rabbi Tara, who is back in our zip code, and she is ready to share some words with us. So I'm just going to pull up her invitation to introduce everyone, and then we'll hear from her. Okay. Oh, I got a screenshot.
Shabbat Shalom, Chag Sameach. It is such a blessing to be here with you. I am in the same time zone, on the same continent, in the same neighborhood. I am not sharing the same bima with Cantor Adam at this moment. I am home with the patient. So much gratitude to you, Cantor, for shepherding us through this service. But I am here and so delighted to report that Mayor's surgery went beautifully. He is on the mend. And I'm thinking as well of our Omer counting, which began the second day of Pesach. It's going to take us all the way through to Shavuot, that 7-week counting. And so we're nearing the end of the first week, a week in which we have been tasked by our mystics to think about the attribute of chesed, of loving kindness. And in particular, as we prepare to count the 6th day, which we will do this evening, we are inspired to think about yesod of chesed, the foundation of loving kindness. And one need not step further than the threshold of Temple Beth-El, the community, be it virtual or in the building, to know what the foundation of loving kindness is all about. there'll be lots more to say in the coming days, but on behalf of Mayor and myself, I want to thank you for wrapping us in so much support and kindness and meals and soup and well wishes. And it has given us so much strength and so much healing, and I know it will continue to do so. You all are such an inspiration. So welcome this evening. It's going to be a very special night of Modim moments and of a dear colleague and friend, Rabbi Michael Lizak speaking. So welcome, Shabbat Shalom, and Chag Sameach. Happy matzah eating for a few more days, if there is such a thing. I'm already quite sick of it.
Thank you, Rabbi Tara, for those beautiful words. We appreciate them more than you know. We miss your presence here on the Bima, and we miss Rabbi Meir's presence as well. I know that we're all looking forward to seeing him back here very soon. So I'm going to bring up onto the screen our Siddur in just a moment. And we're on page 388 as we begin the 7th day of Pesach. We read, "We remember on this day our crossing of the sea so long ago, when Miriam, Moses, and all the Israelites sang this song to God. Adonai Oz, Ozi v'zimrat Yah, Vayehi li lishua. Adonai is my strength and song, who has become my deliverance. This is my God, whom I will enshrine." So too on this day, we sing out in praise, on this day of redemption. Let's sing again. Ozi vezimrat Yah, vayehi li lishua. Ozi vezimrat Yah, vayehi li lishua. וזמרת Yah, ויהי לי לישועה. עוזי וזמרת Yah, ויהי לי לישועה. When Shabbat coincides with the beginning of a festival, or in this case, the beginning of the end of a festival, the 7th day of Pesach, we have an abbreviated Kabbalat Shabbat. And so rather than doing all the Psalms and Lechado Di, it's customary to simply start with the Psalm for Shabbat, Psalm 92, and to continue with Psalm 93, which we don't do so often here at TBE, so it's a great opportunity for us to hear a beautiful melody from Argentina and to recite that psalm. I'll share the Siddur now so that everyone can see and follow along. We're on page 390 of the full Mishkan Tefillah, or if you're using the Shabbat book, we're on page 22 at the top of the page. מזמור שיר ליום השבת, טוב להודות לאדוני ולזמר לשמך עליון, ולזמר לשמך עליון, להגיד בבוקר חסדך ואמונתך בלילות, עלי עשר ועלי נבל, עלי היגיון בכינון, מזמור שיר ליום Shabbat, Tov lehodot l'Adonai, ולזמר לשמך עליון, ולזמר לשמך עליון. כי שמחתני אדוני בפועלך, במעשה ידיך ארנן. מה גדלו מעשיך אדוני, מאוד עמקו מחשבותיך. מזמור שיר ליום השבת, טוב להודות לאדוני, ולזמר לשמך עליון, ולזמר לשמך עליון. At the indented part of the paragraph, Tzadikat amar yifrach, ke'erez balevanon yizgeh, shetulim beveit Adonai, בחצרות אלוהינו יפריחו. עוד ינובון בשיבה, דשנים ורעננים יהיו. ישר אדוני צורי, ולא עוולת בו. Continue with Psalm 93. Trying to make this as big as possible, but Zoom does not want to let me do that for some reason. Adonai malach geut lavesh, lavesh Adonai oz hitazar, aftikon tevel baltimot, aftikon תבל בלטימות. נכון כיסך מאז מעולם, אתה נעשו נהרות אדוני, נעשו נהרות, כולם יעשו נהרות תוך ים, מקולות מים רבים אדירים משברי ים. אדיר במרום אדוני, אדיר במרום אדוני, עדותיך מאומנו מאוד, לביתך נאו הקודש אדוני ליורך ימים, אדוני ליורך ימים. מקולות מים רבים אדירים משברי ים, אדיר במרום אדוני, אדיר במרום אדוני. These words which echo the Song of Songs which we read on Pesach are a lovely way to begin as we transition into the evening service. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה. ועלמד יברך ירותי וימליך מלכותי בחייכון וביומייכון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל בגלה ובזמן קריב ואמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מברך לעולם ולעולמי עלמיה יתברך וישתבח ויפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דמירן בעלמה ואמרו אמן. As we begin the evening service for the festival and for Shabbat, it's worth pointing out that just as we have a slightly different liturgical practice for Kabbalat Shabbat, we have a slightly different sound, a slightly different nusach that we hear on festivals. And so rather than hearing some of the traditional endings, the chatimot, that we are accustomed to on Shabbat, we'll be hearing some of the festival motifs as well. They're related, but you'll hear how they're slightly different. And so if you're hearing things and saying, well, that's not what the cantor usually does, that's why, because tonight is not like other nights. Remember, it's Chag, and we're still in Passover. So we're on page 391 in the festival book, and 394 in the festival book, and 28 in the Kabbalat Shabbat, in the Shabbat evening prayer book. Baruch hu et Adonai hamevorach, Baruch Adonai hamevorach leolam ba'ed, Baruch Adonai hamevorach leolam ba'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bivaro ma'ariv v'aravim b'chachma poteh she'rim u'vivnam she'erim v'chachma v'liv v'tazmanim u'v'chachma v'erim v'orim u'ma'avir yom u'mevi layla u'ma'avdil ben yom u'ven layla Adonai Tzevaot Shemo Elachai v'kayam Tamid yimloch aleinu le'olam va'ed Baruch atah Adonai Hamariv Aravim Ahavat olam Beit Yisrael Amcha Torah u'mitzvot Chukim u'mishpatim Otanu limadeta Al kein Adonai Eloheinu B'shochbeinu u'vekumeinu נשיח בחוקך ונשמח בדברי תורתך ובמידותיך לעולם ועד, כי הם חיינו ויארך ימינו, ובהם נגע יומם ולילה, ואהבתך אל תסיר ממנו לעולמים. ברוך אתה אדוני אוהב עמו ישראל. שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו אדוני אחד. ברוך שם כבוד מלכותו לעולם ועד. If you've been standing, you may be seated as we continue with words of love, the words of Ve'ahavta on page 396, 402 in the festival book, and 38 in the regular prayer book. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha bechol levavcha uvechol nafshecha uvechol meodecha vehayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi metzavecha hayom al levavecha veshinantam levanecha veribarta bam בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך וקשרתם לאות על ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם. Adonai Elohechem Emet. Those words, as we are reliving this week the Exodus from Egypt, we remember those words and we hold fast to the dreams that we have. For if dreams die, life is a broken-winged bird which cannot fly. So hold fast to your dreams, for when dreams go, life is a barren field covered with snow. Hold fast to your dreams. And of course, as we have made that transition from rain and snow, from Geshem and Sheleg to Tal, to dew this week, we don't want snow. Of course, we don't want snow anyway, so let us march together towards the spring, toward the future, toward our liberation, whether it's liberation from COVID or liberation from cold. Let us march forward with the words of Michamocha, which are found on page 406 in the festival book and 40 in your Shabbat book, to the tune of Adir Hu. Safe lomar kifad Adonai et Yaakov ugoalo miyad chazak mimenu baruch ata Adonai Ga'al Yisrael. Hashkivenu is on page 408 and 42. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu leshalom Ehamidenu shomreinu shomreinu lechayim Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu leshalom Ve'hamidenu shomreinu shomreinu lechayim Ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha Ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha. May we lie down in peace this night, in peace, and rise up to life renewed once more. May this night spread over us a canopy of calm, lifted up by the blessing of rest. There will come a time when morning will bring no word of war, famine, or anguish, and there will come a dawn to rejoice in, the peace of mind, heart, and being. Praised are you, source of renewal within us, for the night's rest and for the promise of peace. Ushemor etzeteinu uvoeinu lechaim ushalom me'ata ve'ad olam baruch atah Adonai haporei sukat shalom aleinu ve'al kol ha'amo Yisrael ve'al Yerushalayim. Vishamru is on page 44 in the prayer book, or 410. Veshameru v'nei Israel et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam beini uvein bnei Yisrael oti Sheshet yamim asa Adonai et hashamayim ve'et haaretz u'hayom ha'shevi'i shavad vayinafash u'hayom ha'shevi'i Shabbat vayinafash Vayedaber Moshe et moadei Adonai el bnei Yisrael. At this point, we're going to fast forward in the festival book, if you're following that, to page 468. If you're following along in the Shabbat book, we're turning the page to page 46. And I'm just fast forwarding, and you don't see it, but it's there. Okay. And Adonai sefatai tiftach uhufiya gitehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. If you're comfortable standing, please rise. Otherwise, rise in your hearts as we offer these praises. Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu ve'imotenu Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzhak, Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor ve'anora Eloyom גומל חסדים טובים וקונה הכל וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם למען שמו באהבה מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן ברוך אתה אדוני מגן אברהם ועזרת שרה אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני מחיי הכל אתה רב להושיע מוריד הטל מכלכל חיים בחסד בחיי הכל ברחמים רבים סומך נופלים ורופא חולים ומציל אסורים ומקיים אמונתו ראשוני עפר מי כמוך על גבורות ומדום אליו מלך ממית ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה ונאמן אתה להחיות הכל ברוך אתה אדוני מחיי הכל אתה קדוש ושמך קדוש וקדושים בכל יום יהללוך סלע ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש. We continue with insertions for the festival, which if you're following along in the prayer book for Shabbat, you won't have. So we've provided them on screen. Feel free to be seated at this time. We're on page 478. אתה בחרתנו מכל העמים, אהבת אותנו ורצית בנו, ורוממתנו מכל הלשונות, וקידשתנו במצוותיך, וקרבתנו מלכנו לעבודתך, ושמך הגדול הקדוש עלינו קראת. ותיתן לנו אדוני אלוהינו באהבה, שבתות למנוחה ומועדים לשמחה, חגים וזמנים לששון, חג המצות הזה, זמן חירותנו, מקרא קודש, זכר ליציאת מצרים. Page 480. Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu ve'emotenu, יעלה ויבוא, ויזכר זיכרוננו, וזיכרון כל עמך בית ישראל לפניך, לטובה ולחן ולחסד ולרחמים, ולחיים ושלום ביום חג המצות הזה. זוכרנו אדוני אלוהינו בו לטובה, אמן. ופוקדנו בו לברכה, אמן. והושיענו בו לחיים, אמן. והעשיינו אדוני אלוהינו את ברכת מועדיך לחיים ושלום, לשמחה ולששון, כאשר רצית ואמרת לברכנו. אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו ואמותינו, רצה במנוחתנו. קדשנו במצוותיך ותן חלקנו בטהרתך, שבענו מטובך ושמחנו בישועתך, ותהל ליבנו לעבדך באמת, והנחילנו אדוני אלוהינו באהבה וברצון, בשמחה ובששון שבת ומועדי קודשך, וישמחו בך ישראל מקדשי שמך. ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת וישראל והזמנים. רצה אדוני אלוהינו בעמך ישראל, ותפילתם באהבה תקבל, ותהי לו רצון תמיד עבודת ישראל עמך. אל קרוב לכל קורב פנה אל עבדיך וחוננו, שפוך רוחך עלינו, ותחזינה עינינו בשובך לציון ברחמים. ברוך אתה אדוני המחזיר שכינתו לציון. מודים אנחנו לך. We're on page 486 in the festival book, and in our Shabbat books, we're on page, well, I don't have that page number written down, but we're at the moment where it doesn't matter because Modim is all about gratitude. And this Shabbat, as we have many Shabbats, at least once a month, we have our Modim moments. And I know that many of us this month are so especially glad for these moments which we are celebrating. This month, we're celebrating in March, getting vaccines. So I know that everyone will be happy about that. And I'm going to screen share as we sing our Modim Moments song, Hatov, for all those things that are good. Hatov, Hatov, כי לא חולו רחמך, ויום רחם, כי לא תמוך חסדך. הטוב כי לא חלו רחמך, ויום רחם, כי לא תמוך חסדך. מעולם קיווינו לך, מודים אנחנו לך. הטוב, כי לא חלו רחמך, ויום רחם, כי לא תמוך חסדך. הטוב כי לא חלו רחמך, ויום רחם כי לא תמוך חסדך. מעולם קיווינו לך, מודים אנחנו לך. מעולם קיווינו לך, מודים אנחנו לך. For all these things, morning, noon, and night, we are forever grateful. ועל כולם יתברך ויתרומם שמך מלכנו תמיד לעולם ועד וכל החיים ידעו חסלה והללו את שמך באמת האל ישועתנו ועזרתנו סלע ברוך אתה אדוני הטוב שמך ולך נאה להודות. The evening prayer for peace is found on page 488 or page 62 in the Shabbat book. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Ki Ata Melech Adon Lechol HaShalom. Ki Ata Melech Adon Lechol HaShalom. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. V'tov b'necha levarech et amcha Yisrael b'chol עת ובכל שעה בשלומך. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Tasim Leolam. Tasim Leolam. Baruch atah Adonai המברך את עמו ישראל בשלום. עושה שלום, שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן.
Good job here.
Started. Thank you.
I have a great favor to ask of all of you. Please don't unmute yourself unless you're supposed to be speaking, like Rabbi Lizak is going to be speaking in a few minutes. Please don't unmute yourself, because if you unmute yourselves and we hear the evening news or Jeopardy, we have to mute you. And unfortunately, that means from where I'm standing, I end up muting myself. So please don't do that. It's not good. But in case you didn't hear, we had one final plea for peace from heaven, not just peace, but wholeness of shleimut. And of course, when we think of shleimut, of wholeness, we're also thinking of our beloved Rabbi, Jerry Edelberg. I'm outing you and I'm muting you. You're the culprit. Aha. Okay. So we're thinking of shleimut and wholeness and completeness. And of course, we're thinking of Rabbi Meir this Shabbat and all those who are in need of healing. And so we turn to Misha Berach, which in the festival book is on page 511 and page 253 in the Shabbat book. Please feel free to type names into the chat so we can include people's names for healing and all have them in mind. Of course, we're thinking about, first and foremost, Harav Meir ben Devora Veruvain. And just in time, someone special just entered our Zoom. So we'll read these names and hold their names in our hearts. Sarah Bank, okay, Sarah Bank and Ruth Vilmain, Howard Wolf, and several people who typed yes, Rabbi Meir, Jack Slepian, Peter Tufel, Bill Perez, Sally Wolf, Merrill Walder. And in case you entered a little bit late, yes, Bonnie Mamiya, Madeline Paris, Johnny, Noah, Sue, Gabrielle, Louise, and Jerry, I'm muting you again. And I'm going to again mention the name of our beloved Rabbi, Rabbi Harav Meir ben Devora Ruvain, and all those whose names we hold in our hearts. Let's say Misha Berach for all of them together. Misha Berach Avoteinu Mekor HaBracha Leimotenu. May the source of strength who blessed the ones before us help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Amen. Misha Berach Imotenu Mekor HaBracha Leavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen. May they all have a speedy recovery. Refuah shlema mehera, refuat nefesh, refuat guf. And let us say Amen. It's worth pointing out that the prayer beneath the Misha Berach we just recited at the bottom of the page, Birkat HaGomel, is a prayer we can't wait soon enough to hear Rabbi Meir utter. So we're looking forward to that time. Soon, soon, soon. Now it is my great pleasure to share some words that are offered by Rabbi Tara. She is going to introduce our speaker for the evening, who's going to give our Devar Torah and words of Torah that are not just about the literal words of the parashah, but putting our words into action, praying with our feet and our hands and all of our bodies, the things that make our prayers and the Torah come alive. So here we have Rabbi Tara. We're sharing sound, and here she is.
It is my great honor and joy to introduce our speaker for this evening, Rabbi Michael Lizak. So there are some friendships in our lives that have an epic, unquantifiable impact. Such is the nature of Meir's and my friendship with Rabbi Lizak and with his wife, Rabbi Noah Kushner. So Meir lived with Michael back in the day when Meir was living in LA, so sort of as an ex-lawyer. And Mike Lizak was a rabbinical student at the time. And it was during those very formative years that the idea of a rabbinic path began to open for Meir. In addition, Michael's mother, Sylvia, and Meir's mother, Dottie, are best friends. And now Michael's children and our children are very, very close. So we have 3 generations of epic friendship here. And there's also the small matter of Rabbi Lizak and his wife, Rabbi Kushner, conspiring to set Meir and I up. I think it took about 3 times, but they succeeded. So their role in our lives has not been insignificant. I've also had the real pleasure over so many now decades of friendship to watch Rabbi Lizak's professional rabbinic calling evolve in congregational work and now in his work with Glide. And so a few sentences on that, reading from the beautiful description that you emailed to us. And I know you'll take this and enrich it, but just to give a context for the words you're about to share tonight. I don't think that there's a rabbi in North America or even in the world forging this path, blazing a trail as you are. So Michael Lizak is the rabbi at Glide in San Francisco, a radically inclusive, just, and loving community mobilized to alleviate suffering and break the cycles of poverty and marginalization. He works in Glide's Center for Social Justice, aiming to magnify the impact of Glide's justice machinery and to forge covenantal bonds between Glide and communities throughout the Bay Area. Rabbi Lizak brings 100+ civic, tech, and healthcare leaders on Glide's annual Alabama Justice Pilgrimage, and he spearheads groundbreaking work with law enforcement and district attorneys from around the country to help them understand the challenges faced by people living in extreme poverty. In his previous position as congregational rabbi in Marin County, Rabbi Lizak founded programs to love and support families and inmates at Pelican Bay, San Quentin, and Vacaville state prisons. Rabbi Lizak is on the national board of TRUA, the Rabbinic Call for Human Rights, and he's married, as I said, to Rabbi Noah Kushner, and is the proud father of 3 daughters. So as I said, tonight we're thinking about Yesod Sheba Chesed, the foundation of loving kindness. Thank you for teaching us about that with your words tonight, Michael.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody. It's rare that I get an introduction that brings me to tears. So I'm going to start from this place of vulnerability to say that I really love your rabbis with all I've got. I got stories aplenty that I can tell you after Shabbos, but suffice it to say that Meir and Tara are on our innermost circle, and we love them fiercely. And the fact that my mom and Meir's mom have been friends for 60+ years, and that our kids are covenantally bound, fuels my soul and inspires me to no end. To my brother Meir, who is watching, I know he said he had surgery, but he's actually preparing for a triathlon. So, you know, you can believe what you say, but like I talked to him today, he's going to be fine, thank God. So I'm gonna just, before I start, because I know I'll forget to do it later, I'm gonna put in the chat the Glide's website and my email address if you have any questions when we are done, or you wanna be in touch on any level. So Shabbat Shalom, Moadim L'Simcha. I hope Pesach has been deeply meaningful for you all so far. Greetings from San Francisco. I want to tell you a little bit about me and my trajectory from a synagogue rabbi of 18 years to this place called Glide, where I'm doing a lot of economic and racial justice work. But before, like, Glide on the West Coast is a well-known brand. I don't know if it is there in Long Island, but I'll tell you a little bit about it before I tell you about my pathway there. Glide is both a church. Until a few months ago, we were a Methodist church that on every Sunday morning has a 50-member gospel ensemble and a 7-member band called the Change Band. And in that church on Sunday mornings, you will have literally homeless, mentally ill folks wrestling with addiction and tech billionaires sitting next to one another. It was founded by Reverend Cecil Williams, who is 92 years old right now. And when he came to the church 60 plus years ago, the first thing he did was he took the cross off the wall and he said, I want this to be a house of prayer for all peoples. So for East Coast Jews, it's hard for them to wrap their head around this, but in San Francisco on any given day, at Glide, Glide's clients, Glide's donors, people praying in Glide Church, 10 to 20% of the people hanging out at Glide are Jewish. Now that's a whole other subject for another talk. I can unpack San Francisco and Bay Area Judaism for you Long Island Jews. So Glide, on top of being the church, is a foundation. I work in the Center for Social Justice at the Glide Foundation. So what the foundation does, I think of it as a 7-story high-rise Holy of Holies at the corner of Ellis and Taylor here in San Francisco. We feed, even in the middle of COVID, we feed 2,200 meals every day of the year. We used to feed people inside. We now feed them in to-go clamshells going out of the building. We give away 1.5 million needles to people wrestling with addiction. We test their drugs for fentanyl. We want to make sure that we test them for HIV and Hep C. I'll tell you about an Israeli woman I met early on, a little bit later. Glide has a women's center that helps women who have been hurt last night and 30 years ago. We have a program called Men in Progress that helps men and now women unlearn violence. We have something called harm reduction, which when I was a suburban rabbi, that meant to wear a bike helmet or to put on a seatbelt. This is the group that gives out the 1.5 million clean needles, and a drug called Narcan, which is an opioid reverser. If one of our beloved clients overdoses on an opioids on the street or in our building, we revive them from the dead. We do the second blessing of the Amidah, which we sang earlier. It traditionally ends with the words Mechaye HaMetim. We literally, last year, we saved 190 people who would have died, who literally would have died. Some of them OD'd literally in front of my office, and Glide's harm reduction team injects them with Narcan, and they literally turn from blue and come back to life. It is an unbelievable miracle drug that you should learn about. So that is the Glide Foundation, of which so how did a rabbi get to Glide? How did that happen? A little backstory on me. I was a congregational rabbi for 18 years, loved congregational life, loved being with people at the most intense moments of their lives, loved helping them shape those moments, loved building out pilgrimages to Israel and shaping work around justice. My wife, as Rabbi Tara mentioned, is a rabbi as well. And about 10 years ago, she started a congregation from scratch in San Francisco called The Kitchen. Now, as any congregational rabbi will tell you, or cantor, life as a congregational rabbi or cantor is super hard and intense. Having one of those people in a family is insane. Having two was like, in two separate congregations was close to suicidal. We were apart in Jewish time. We were never together on Shabbos and holidays. And I knew I needed to find a new job. At about the same time, I read a book called The New Jim Crow, which if you haven't read, I would put it towards the top of your list. It talks about racism in the mass incarceration system and how the legal system is set up to much more easily and smoothly lock up people of color than white folks. I knew that this new Jim Crow thing, this idea that more people of color were in prison, I thought that was alive in the South. I had no idea it was alive in the Bay Area. I was reading that book while taking the ferry from Marin County, where I lived, to San Francisco, past our state prison called San Quentin. And as I was reading that book, I looked out of the ferry and I looked at the prison that I was passing. I said, I should get inside. And about a month later, I got myself inside, and I was teaching a group of 50 men who were on death row, Psalm 118, which is all about making teshuvah. It's a very holy psalm. And I will tell you that I had the most intense conversations in my entire life that I've ever had with those men about teshuvah, about making immense mistakes in life, and how they might be able to heal. And those conversations rocked me so much that Rosh Hashanah, about 3 months later, I stood up. And the last thing I need to tell you is that Marin County is an incredibly Caucasian place. It's about 90% white. 90% of the folks that live there are white. 10% of them are Latinx and African American. But the racial makeup of the room that I was teaching inside San Quentin was about 70% men of color, right? So it was almost the inverse racial makeup of the outside and inside. And I was like, oh my God, this new Jim Crow thing doesn't just live in Alabama or Texas. It's alive and well right here in the Bay Area, right here in Marin County. And so I stood up in front of my congregation at Rosh Hashanah and I said, hey guys, this new Jim Crow thing, it's alive and ticking here, and it's on our clock and on our dime and in our town, and we should do something about it. And I built out what I called the New Jim Crow Working Group, where we looked head on at racial justice issues and mass incarceration. And I built out groups who would go into local congregations and local jails and prisons, to celebrate Jewish holidays with incarcerated Jewish folks. To this day, I have a group of people who still go in. It was true pre-COVID, it will be true post-COVID, who go into San Quentin monthly to celebrate Jewish holidays with the incarcerated Jewish men at San Quentin. We built a Passover Seder for 120 men, where we gave them world-class brisket and matzo ball soup, which we made in our synagogue kitchen. And we did our best to love these men who have made mistakes. And I could tell you 100 stories about what I learned inside that prison. It rocked me to my core, and I knew I wanted to do more work like this. So much so that when I knew I was looking for a new job, I went to a local funder at the Haas Foundation here in San Francisco, Stephanie Rapp, who I think of as the midwife of me being at Glide. And she took me on a justice tour of San Francisco and ultimately got me to Glide and sat me in front of Reverend Cecil Williams and his wife, Janice Mirakatani, who I think of as the Yodas of the old growth justice warriors of San Francisco. Cecil, as I said, is 92. Janice is 79, 80, although I'm not allowed to tell you how old she is. And in their early days, as I mentioned, they took the cross off the wall and said, we want this to be a house of prayer for all peoples. And they did such radical things. They said, anyone on the margins in this town, anyone who is struggling, Glide is for you. So much so that Janice and Cecil were officiating at gay weddings long before anyone was uttering those words. They had a convention for prostitutes at and sex workers at the church, and wanted to see anyone who was on the margins, who society was judging, but who were really just struggling with addiction or mental health issues or poverty, which has been criminalized. Glide and Cecil said, and Janice said, we want this to be your home. And in that meeting, Janice and Cecil said, well, what would it be like to have a rabbi here at Glide? And my synagogue knowing self was like, I got no idea what it means to be a rabbi at a church. I know how to hang out with the Jews. And so in the middle of interviewing for Glide, I went to go see the band U2. Some of you might know, a famous rock band. And I took my 3 daughters, and in the middle of Bono singing one of the songs called I Still Haven't Found What I'm Looking For. Mind you, I'm interviewing for Glide at the time. Bono looks at 70,000 people in the crowd and says, I want to give a very special welcome to the Reverend Cecil Williams, who's here tonight. And let's turn this place into Glide, right? And I looked at my kids and I looked at the heavens. I'm like, maybe I should take this job here, right? So I started without a job description in July of 2017. And the first time I gave a sermon in the Glide church, I walked in and I was sitting in the front row pew of the church, and I had my yarmulke on, and my 80-year-old mother was next to me. My rabbi wife was on the other side of me, and an Israeli Jewish woman in her probably 60s came up and started speaking Hebrew to me. And she said to me effectively, Glide is my shul. Glide is my congregation. And I've been coming every year, every week, every Sunday morning for 20 years. Now, my particular Jewish self, I was like, why would this Israeli Jewish woman be coming to a church and not to a local synagogue? What I later learned is that she had been a heroin addict 20 years ago. And I can't think of really any synagogue in America that I know of that is ready and knows what to do with a heroin addict. I can imagine myself as a congregational rabbi being afraid of that. Well, Glide knew exactly what to do with this Israeli Jewish woman. They said, we're going to give you clean needles, and we're going to test your drugs to make sure there's nothing that's going to kill you in there. And if and when you are ready to get clean, we'll help you get clean. We're going to meet you not where we want you to be, which is clean, but we're going to meet you where you're at. We're going to love you and treasure your life, which was a radical thing for me to understand as a congregational rabbi who had never thought about this. So I preached that morning and got in a relationship with this woman and started at Glide without a job description and took a very deep dive into Glide in the Tenderloin. And one thing to understand about the neighborhood where Glide is, it's situated in a neighborhood called the Tenderloin. We are 1 kilometer away from Twitter's world headquarters and a mile away from Salesforce's world headquarters. There's more billionaires per capita in my town than any town on the planet. And when you step out in front of Glide, you see people splayed out across the street. You know, sometimes you don't know if they're living or dead, right? Struggling with, in the middle of third world poverty, mostly people of color, which 6% of the population of San Francisco is African-American, 37% of our unsheltered folks are African-American. You know, Michelle Alexander in her book said that New Jim Crow goes from slavery to mass incarceration. I would push it to mass poverty of why there are so many people of color. It's just remnants of slavery on the streets in front of Glide. So I came, as I said, without the job description, and I do 3 big things at Glide. I'll tell you about those, and then maybe we'll pause and turn it over. And when we're done, if there's any questions on any level. The first thing I do is I do broad outreach to the Jewish community. The Jewish community has been envious or jealous of Glide since Glide started. The Jews have been the major funders of Glide, are in awe of the work we're doing. So every Jewish day school from 40 miles south to 30 miles north comes into Glide multiple times a year to serve meals, to pack harm reduction kits, and to study Jewish texts with me. My wife Noah's congregation, their religious school, which we call the Freedom School, meets at Glide once a month and studies Torah and then lives Torah. And every Jewish day camp, there's two Jewish summer camps, Camp Tawanga and Camp Newman, come into Glide every summer. So I serve as kind of open, broad doors from Glide out to the broader Jewish community. The second thing I do at Glide is soon after I got there, they said, hey, Rabbi, can you build out a training program for police officers and district attorneys to help make them more compassionate in their work? Now, I didn't know anything about cops or DAs or training them, but I am a product of Jewish summer camp and know how to, and I've taken many folks on justice pilgrimages to Israel, and I know how to cohere a group and deliver transformational learning. So we built out what we call a program, a 3-day immersive justice pilgrimage into Glide called An Officer and a Mensch, where we bring 25 to 50 cops and DAs at a time into Glide. And we make them come out of uniform, and I take their cell phones from them, and I meet them in front of Glide at 6 a.m. And I say, I want you to walk around the neighborhood for an hour. And I want you to imagine that this was your bedroom. And I want you to, when they come back after walking, I made them wait in line without their buddies in the Glide food line. And I say, I want you to imagine that Glide is your dining room. And then we bring in Glide clients and Glide staff whose lives have been transformed by this wall of unconditional love that Glide brings into the universe. And invariably, 80, 90% of these police officers and district attorneys are transformed by the work we do. I talk about helping them put on Glide goggles, helping to walk through the world, thinking about Glide values, there's 5 of them, which are being radically welcoming and inclusive and truth-telling, and really showing up with unconditional love. So that's project number 2. So I do outreach to the Jewish community. I do this officer and a mensch program. And the third thing I do is I run a pilgrimage to Montgomery, Alabama. There's a man named Brian Stevenson, who, if you don't know him, before, like when Pesach goes out by the end of Monday night, you should watch Brian Stevenson's TED Talk. you should move his book called Just Mercy to the top of your reading or audiobook list, because I think he's one of the most righteous people we have in America. I brought him to speak to my congregation in Marin about 8 years ago. Brian founded the Equal Justice Initiative, which gets wrongly convicted people off of death row. Imagine this. In his career, he's taken 120 people who were wrongly convicted of a crime, who were sentenced to death, but were completely innocent, were guilty really of nothing other than being Black in the South. So that's what the Equal Justice Initiative does. The photograph you'll see behind me, about 3 years ago, EJI opened up the Legacy Museum, which connects the dots from slavery to mass incarceration, tells the birth story, the brutal birth story of slavery on our continent, and connects that story to mass incarceration, connects the story to the story of, I told you about San Quentin being 70% men of color in a county that is 90% Caucasian. So we take 100 people a year to this museum, and this photograph is taken outside of what's called the National Memorial for Peace and Justice, which is a memorial that remembers 4,400 known African-American victims of lynching. It is hands down the most potent architecture I've ever walked through. I believe every American should go, when you get your vaccines, you should go back to Paris and certainly go to Israel, but you should all make pilgrimage to Montgomery, Alabama, because I think we're not going to heal this festering racial wounds in our towns and in our communities and in our country until we wrestle with the worst stories that have happened on our shores. And I can think of no better place in America that does that more potently than these museum and memorial. Maybe the last story I will tell is that I was scheduled to give the sermon in the Glide Church the morning after the shooting at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh. I'm sure you all remember that haunting and harrowing and terrifying day. I had one sermon prepared, but I gave a different one that morning. It was 24 hours after the shooting that I was standing in front of 1,000 people in the Glide Church. And I stood up in front of the congregation. Maybe I should say that I'm helping to bring in hundreds of people from the Jewish community each week. We bake challahs in the Glide kitchen. I stood up in front of Glide and I said, the Jews love this place. We love you with all we got. We support you financially. We come to pray with you because we love this music and we love the interracial, interclass, interreligious vibe in this space. We love the holy justice work that you do of feeding people who are really struggling. And we come here regularly. This week, the Jews need you. I want you to pick up the phone and call your Jewish friends and let them know they're not alone. And that synagogue you drive by every week, I want you to get out of your car and walk inside and let the Jewish community know that they're not alone. And this Friday night, I want to invite you all to come to the kitchen, to my wife Noah's congregation that she founded, to celebrate Shabbat with us. And the kitchen usually gets 200 to 300 people on a Shabbat. Now, you can't tell the fire marshal that's happened, but 300 people from the Glide showed up, plus another 400 from the kitchen. We were way over the fire marshal's limit, and the entire Glide ensemble came and sang with us. And at this moment when my Jewish heart was bleeding, this Glide community showed up and loved us with all they had. And I thought to myself, this is the America I want to raise my daughters and God willing grandchildren in one day, where we cross lines of race and class and religion and education and love with one another fiercely and show up to take care of one another long before there's a crisis, so that God forbid, if and when there is one, we're there. Psalm 147, verse 3, calls God the healer of shattered hearts. I think these stories about racial terror in America and racial strife should shatter our hearts and should shatter our hearts daily. And I think we should model ourselves and remember that we all are created Beth-El Elohim as images of God. And I want to invite you to think about how you might build out a practice, not just a one-time thing, but a daily and weekly and seasonal practice about how you might step onto this justice stage in your town and in your state and country, to be active players, to be healers of shattered hearts, of individual hearts and communal hearts, and the broken heart that is America's heart, that I think we have an opportunity to rise on that stage. So with that, I will say Shabbat Shalom. Just so blessed to be in this space. I really, wish I was in your sanctuary with you, and even more than that, I wish you were at the Glide with me, and hope to welcome you one day to San Francisco and feed you a glide challah, and bring you to shul at the kitchen and to church at glide. Shabbat shalom.
Thank you, Rabbi Elizak, for that amazing description of your work, the work of repairing this world and repairing people's lives, the broken-hearted, as you said. It's such amazing and it's so inspiring, and it's so wonderful to have a dear friend of the Feldmans with us for Shabbat, and we can't thank you enough for those inspiring words. And we encourage everyone to learn more about Glide. The link is in the chat bar. I'm sure that the rabbi will put them in the chat again. Good. All right. Okay. Thank you, Rabbi. We are turning now to page 570. And also, if you're in the Shabbat book, I believe it's page 306. We're at the moment where, as Rabbi Feldman mentioned earlier, we count the Omer, and we've been counting the Omer since the second night of Passover, and so I invite you to join with me as we continue to count the Omer, and I'll bring that up on the screen so that you can see. Okay, as soon as I find it, there it is. Okay. Boom, and screen share. There it is. Okay. Oh, that's not the right page, but we'll go with it. Okay. How about, forgive me, we'll have to do it. You'll have to just trust me that I know what I'm doing. Okay. Hineni mukhan umzoman, hineni mukhan umzoman, hineni mukhan umzoman, shel mitzvah lekayem mitzvah taseh, shel sfirat ha'omer. I'm ready to fulfill the mitzvah of counting the Omer. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al sefirat ha'omer. Yesterday was the 5th day of the Omer, which means that today is Hayom Shisha Shehem Shisha Hayom Yomim LaOmer. Today is the 6th day of the Omer, which is 6 days of the Omer. If we were tomorrow, we would say it's a week, but we're not quite there yet. So thank you for helping me recite the Omer. Now, as we are lifted toward the Sfirot of Chesed of the Omer, we rise in our hearts and to our feet as we turn to page 282, and the festival book 586. Aleinu l'shabeach la'adon ha'kol, mateit gedula leyotze bereshit, shelo asanu kegoyei ha'aratzot, velo samanu kemishpechot ha'adama, shelo sam chelkeinu kohem, v'gohor aleinu kechol ha'mohonam, v'anachnu korim, u'mishtachavim modim, lifnei melech malchei hamrachim, akadosh baruch hu, v'ne'emar v'haya Adonai lemelech al kol haaretz, v'yom to those who are grieving and to those we have lost this week, this month, and in the times, this time of year in years past. Um, if you are mourning, I invite you to, or if you're observing a yort site, I invite you to share that name in the chat bar so we can share their names in our hearts. And, there I am. Okay. And we're also keeping in mind members of this congregation whom we have lost this week, just this week. Ingrid Hecker and Ethel Pomerantz, as well as Suzette Gross. In addition, we're thinking about those we have lost in the last 30 days, including Salvador Levy, and yard sites of members of the congregation, Robert Aaron, Bella Abrams, Irving Breyer, Joseph Kaplan, Mortimer Carr, Beatrice Cohn Levy, Linda Cordell, Magda Salazar, Barbara Kaplan D. Cristofaro, Fanny Epstein, Isaac Ehrlich, Sid Getz, Dora Lear, Eleanor Newmark, Magda Prince, Bruce Weinberg, Max Siegel, Dr. Richard Dubensky, Shirley and Seymour Burke, Polly Weiner, that's not for your site, Sonia Ehrlich, Ann Hand, Gloria Orleans Hornwood, Evan Horowitz, Jeffrey Jastro, and Ethan Sisser, brother of Stan Levine, who unfortunately passed away this morning. Our hearts go out to you, Jordana, and to Stan, and to the whole Levine family. We hold their names in our hearts as we offer praises to the eternal in the place of those who can no longer do so themselves. If you're mourning, please feel free to stand, or if it's your custom to rise from Mourner's Kaddish to say those praises on behalf of those who are no longer able to or have no one to say them for them, please do so now as we say together, Yit Kadal v'Yitkada Shemei Rabba ve'alma divra chirute v'yamlich malchute v'chayechon uvyomechon uvchaye dechol bet Yisrael ba'agala uvizman kariv v'imru amen. Yehe Shemei Rabba mevorach le'elam u'lamei maya. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומן ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתהלל ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושלתה תושבחתה ונחמתה ואמירן בעלמא ואמרו אמן יהא שלמה רבה מן שמיה וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו אמן עושה שלום במרומיו הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל, ואמרו amen. All right, dear friends, we are in the final stretch, and it's time for possibly the longest part of our service, the longest thing that we offer, announcements. Okay, if you're standing, please be seated, by the way. Tonight, our virtual Oneg is hosted by Elaine Markowitz. Thank you, Elaine. Feel free to stay on the Zoom when our service concludes and say hi to some of your friends and neighbors. It's fun to see people. We're looking for more people who can host these in the future. It's very simple. You don't have to bake anything. You just contact the main office. Let us know. Tomorrow morning, Shabbat morning, 9 a.m., Torah study, and at 10 a.m., Shabbat service with, actually, Chag service, Chag and Shabbat, with Yizkor, 10 a.m. Havdalah tomorrow night at 8:30. So I'm looking forward to seeing some of you at services tomorrow in the morning and some of you at Havdalah at night. If you're keeping an eighth day, as some do. Many Reform Jews do not, but if you're keeping an eighth day, don't forget that when you light Havdalah, you light it from an existing flame, and you say Ben Kodesh LaKodesh as opposed to Kodesh LaChol. If you're a 7-day person, then do it as you normally do it. I'm looking forward to seeing more of you on Monday morning and Thursday morning at our morning minyan service, 7:15 a.m. Please join me. It's fun to have a minyan. So if I'm getting up, join me. It'll be like your strong morning coffee. Some special program notes. This evening you saw our Modi Moments, lots of people getting vaccinated. We hope we'll see more people getting vaccinated. And next month in May, we want you to send in for our moments of gratitude, our Modi Moments, pictures of you and your mother or your grandmother or a special woman as we recognize Mother's Day. All right, send those in by May 5th to Jackie Wadsworth here at the temple. On Thursday, April 8th, that's next week, continuing next week at 7:30, we will have a Yom HaShoah Holocaust Remembrance. And we're looking forward to hearing from members of our clergy, members of the Temple Israel clergy, Shirenu Choir of Long Island, and testimony of a Shoah survivor and Temple Israel member Manfred Corman. I know there's also an interesting program going on that night concurrent to our Yom HaShoah commemoration, which is themed to Yom HaShoah. Our own member Len Schiff has a staged reading on Zoom of his musical drama Signs of Life, which is about the experience at Theresienstadt concentration camp. So we'll make that link available for all, and we'll put that on a Facebook page, and Len can send that to me, and I will share it. Saturday, April 10th, if you'd like to participate in Shabbat services, let me know. I'd love to see you there and have you join us. The next morning, Sunday, April 11th, 10 a.m., as part of our Torah Celebration Project, celebrating our ancient Sephardic Torah. It's so special. We're going to have a great speaker and educator, Peter Geffen, who's going to speak on the Moroccan exception, La Convivencia. This will be the second of our Torah Celebration Project Adult Ed series events. Get to know our Sephardic Torah and get to know Peter Geffen, a celebrated Jewish educator and scholar of Sephardic history, and we'll learn all about Jewish life in Morocco. Thursday, April 15th, Brotherhood monthly meeting, 7 p.m. Friday, April 16th, 7 p.m., Shabbat services with an in-person element. So if you'd like to come and be in our sanctuary, socially distanced, of course, sign up in advance. There'll be information about that in our email coming out this week. That next day, we'll celebrate the bat mitzvah of Juliet Burkhoff. And on Sunday, April 18th, the annual Great Neck Rabbinic Dialogue featuring Rabbis Meir and Tara Feldman, Rabbi Howard Stecker, and Rabbi Dale Polikoff. Should be fantastic. Okay, everything after that, April 18th and forward, I'm going to save till next week because we've gone on long enough. Let's conclude with Festival Kiddush, which is, well, I'm just gonna do it. It's on page 386, all the way back at the beginning. If you're looking for the regular Kiddush, well, that's not what we're doing today because it's a Chag. So I'm going to, here we go. All right. Vayehi erev vayivoker yom hashishi. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol am veromemanu mikol lashon vekideshanu b'mitzvotav. V'titen lanu Adonai Eloheinu b'yahava Shabbatot limnucha u'moadim lesimcha Chagim uzmanim lesason et yom hashabat hazeh ve'et yom chag hamatzot hazeh Zman cheruteinu mikra kodesh זכר ליציאת מצרים, כי בנו בחרת, ואותנו קידשת מכל העמים, בשבת ומועדי קודשך באהבה וברצון. בשמחה ובששון הנחלתנו, ברוך אתה אדוני, מקדש השבת, וישראל והזמנים. לחיים. Tuesday. Great vintage. Let's make hamotzi. Tonight's motzi is brought to you by Matzah by Strites for the unleavened experience of a lifetime. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. So good. And yes, it's a matzah tie. All right. Let's sing Adon Olam. Adon Olam Asher Malach B'terem Kol Yetzir Nivra Li'ed Nasa B'chefto Kol Azai Melech Shemo Nikra Adon Olam Asher Malach B'terem Kol Yetzir Nivra Li'ed B'chefto Kol Azai Melech Shemo Nikra. Let it chew for a second. Ve'acharei kichlot hakol levado yimloch nora ve'hu haya ve'hu hoveh ve'hu yeh b'tifarat ve'hu echad v'yein sheni le'amshil lo le'achbira ve'li reshit ve'li tachlit ve'lo ha'os ve'ha'misra. Last verse. Beyado afkid ruchi ve'eti shan ve'aira ve'im ruchi gevioti Adonai li ve'lo ira Adon olam asher malach b'terem kol yetzir nivra. Shabbat Shalom, Chag Sameach. It's great to see you all. We'll see many of you tomorrow morning for Torah study at 9 o'clock and Chag with Hallel and Yizkor at 10 o'clock. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shalom. Thanks, everybody.
Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom from San
Thank
Francisco.
you, Rabbi.
You're welcome.
Rabbi
Have
Isaac.
a beautiful Shabbos. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.
Good Shabbos to you.
Good Shabbos.
Jordana,
Thank you.
you're
Shabbat
welcome.
Shalom. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Hi, Phil.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody.